On the channel, I have been covering multiple teams and their quarterback rooms for 2025, and nobody has a more fascinating quarterback room than Bill Belichick. Obviously, he's an NFL coaching legend, but he's going to have his work cut out for him in 2025, as his quarterback room is full of unique and honestly not very experienced options. He is a quarterback that started 2 games from Purdue, a guy who's a 6th year coming off of a horrible injury, and then 2 true freshmen who shot up recruiting rankings. This is truly a bizarre quarterback room for a first-year head coach. In today's video, we're going to talk about that. We're going to go through all 4 options, talk about who they are, how they got to this point, and what they bring to the table, and I'm ultimately going to give you my thoughts on who I think should win the job. But before we get started, if you're a big fan of college football, be sure to subscribe to the channel, leave a like if you want to support today's video, and let me know what player, team, topic, or situation I can cover next. Now let's get started and talk about North Carolina's quarterback room. So before we get started, be sure to let me know which team I should cover next, and check out my playlist as I've already done videos on Georgia, Notre Dame, and Auburn, and they are all good content. Okay, so the first guy I want to talk about for UNC is going to be Ryan Brown. So last year, the North Carolina Tar Heels lost Jacoby Criswell, Connor Harrell, and Michael Merdinger. All 3 of these guys transferred, so the first transfer they brought in was Ryan Brown. He's a very unique story, as Brown began his high school career at Brother Rice High School in Detroit, and his father actually played there as well, and went on to play running back at both Northwestern and Boston College, and would actually go off to the NFL. After playing safety as a sophomore, Ryan Brown would then become a quarterback as a junior. Except with everything going on in the world in 2020, this would make things very difficult for him, and Michigan initially voted to postpone the 2020 college football season. His dad knew how crucial his junior year of film was for college recruiting, so they looked at other options. The family had relatives near Sarasota, Florida, and they would probably not be changing their fall football plans. After a year at Riverview High School, Brown would eventually go to Venice High School. He ended up being really good there, as he had an MVP performance in the state championship game, became a runner-up for Mr. Football, and in that matchup, he had 250 yards and 4 touchdowns. That performance came on December 18th, 3 days after the start of the early signing period. Except, there were no programs who stepped up with a late offer, and Brown would need to develop more if he wanted to go to college. Jim Brown knew about Milford Academy because its coach ended up playing at Boston College after him, so for an extra year, he'd end up going to Milford Academy, where he threw for 3,000 yards and 29 touchdowns, and actually had the all-time touchdown record there. At the time of his recruitment, Brown was recruited by several schools, and that included offers from several MAC programs, but eventually he caught Purdue's attention. Both Jeff and Brian Brom ended up becoming the first Power 4 program to extend a scholarship offer, and Brown quickly would accept it in early October. According to 24/7 Sports, Ryan was the 3-star recruit, the number 50 quarterback, and the 1,024th best player in the class of 2023. Ryan Brown remembers feeling totally forgotten, as he had went to 3 high schools in just 5 years. Only one power program offered him a scholarship, and then the coaching staff who he committed to ended up leaving before signing day for Louisville. He also loved Ryan Walters, but he brought in a new quarterback in Hudson Card just a couple of days after. He said, quote, "I have a chip on my shoulder from kind of just bouncing around and having to go to prep school. So I feel like I have a lot to prove, and I just love football, so it's nothing more than loving the game and just wanting to win, because that's why you play it." So yeah, Brown ended up playing 2 years at Purdue, and then this past year, he appeared in 8 games for the Boilers. He started 2 games, and on the season threw for 532 yards and 4 touchdowns with a pair of picks. He also ran for 241 yards on the ground. His by far best game came against Illinois, as in that game he had 297 yards and 3 touchdowns, and also ran for 118. They ended up barely losing that game, and he became the 2nd quarterback in school history to throw for over 250 and rush for over 100 yards in a game. At 6'4" and 215 pounds, Ryan Brown has 3 years of eligibility remaining, and he has a cannon of an arm, is a dual-threat quarterback, is pretty mature, and showed glimpses of stardom. That's why Bill Belichick has gotten him in his 2025 North Carolina quarterback room, and while I don't think Ryan Brown will probably win the job, he's at least going to get a crack at it because of his potential and experience. Option number 2 for the Tar Heels is true freshman Autori Newkirk. Mrs. Newkirk remembers watching her son rise early each and every day to head to practice and work on his game. He grew up on the East Coast and eventually got to Maury High School, and opposing teams and fans were asking before the start of the season who would be next up. Newkirk had waited his turn, and by the time he was an upperclassman, he was ready to go. Their head coach said, quote, "We already knew we had a kid in our pocket moving forward. We were always comfortable with him. Last year, he was our JV guy." Newkirk had waited his turn and finally took over for them as a junior. His coach said, quote, "When people think of the face of our team, you immediately think of me as the head coach, but the second person you think of is Torrey Newkirk." As a senior, Newkirk ended up blowing up, completing 77% of his passes for 3,802 yards and 50 touchdowns. On top of that, he also had over 600 yards and 6 scores on the ground. This guy was an absolute stud as a senior. He also led them to consecutive undefeated seasons in both 2023 and 2024, winning 30 straight games in 2 Class 5A state championships. In January, he decided to become the 13th member of North Carolina's 2025 recruiting class, joining Bryce Baker. He had received 11 Division I offers, with North Carolina being the lone Power 4 program to extend him an offer. At the time, though, Newkirk was only seen as a 2-star recruit. Eventually, he actually went from the number 52 quarterback in the class to number 22, at least in 24/7 Sports database. Honestly, it was for good reason. Newkirk threw for over 4,400 yards in back-to-back years, had a 77% completion rate, and in total had 8,838 yards with 114 touchdowns. When signing with North Carolina, he said, quote, "It means everything that I have done and everything that I have worked for has paid off. I'm really happy for myself and I'm ready to get to work." He will now play for head coach Bill Belichick, and he said, quote, "I was starstruck, but then came the realization that he is the greatest coach in the world, and he's about to be my coach. First time meeting him in person, he told me he wanted me to come play for him. It was a done deal." He became the 5th player in the history of the All-Tidewater Football Player of the Year award to win back-to-back seasons. Pretty crazy. Another interesting note about Newkirk is he's a left-handed quarterback, and some compare him to Michael Vick. His head coach said, quote, "As far as the arm, him and Michael Vick are very similar. I've heard some people call him Baby Vick. As for the arm, I definitely see a comparison, and the running and toughness, yes, they're probably alike." According to 24/7 Sports, Newkirk was a 4-star recruit and the number 22 quarterback in the class of 2025. He won't be the only lefty in this year's quarterback room, as they also have Max Johnson, but honestly, I don't really know what he's going to do this year. Obviously, this guy has put up big numbers and has been a winner the last couple of seasons, but to expect an 18-year-old to come in and win the starting job would be a little bit crazy. But again, this quarterback room is extremely confusing to me, and in my opinion, he definitely has the athleticism and the abilities to start, but there'd probably be a sharp learning curve for him. But that's pretty much as with any other quarterback in this room, including Max Johnson. He's the son of former Super Bowl winning quarterback Brad Johnson, who played at Florida State and in the NFL. He knew exactly what he needed to do to get Max on the recruiting radar and to college football someday. He was also close friends with Mark Richt, and while at a camp at LSU in the late 2010s, he'd leave Baton Rouge with an offer, and his recruiting stock would go through the roof. LSU ended up finally landing at second quarterback in the class of 2020, as alongside TJ Finley, Max Johnson became the guy. He picked the Tigers over offers from Georgia, Miami, and Wisconsin. During his senior year at Connie Valley, he threw for 2,000 yards and 28 touchdowns. He also completed 66% of his passes and rushed for 7 touchdowns in the 14 games that they played that year. Luckily, Max didn't have to do it all alone, as him and his brother Jake ended up having a stellar campaign together, as Jake Johnson was a 4-star tight end recruit. He was part of the class of 2022. Max was the 4-star recruit, the number 10 pro-style quarterback, and the 256th best player in the class of 2020. So how'd he end up doing at college? Well, he got a couple of opportunities to start as a true freshman for LSU, battling out with TJ Finley after Miles Brennan went down. He famously led LSU to that upset victory over Florida, and then Johnson took over as the full-time starter in 2021 for them. But he'd end up making a change, as going into 2022, he would transfer to Texas A&M. In 4 total years with the Tigers and Aggies combined, he passed for 5,800 yards and 47 touchdowns. He was hoping for a fresh start with the Tar Heels after an up-and-down career at both programs, and he ended up having 22 starts under his belt, and that made him very attractive to head coach Mack Brown. North Carolina had recently just gone through both Sam Howell and Drake May, so they wanted an experienced guy to keep things going. That was supposed to be their guy in Max Johnson, and he ended up actually starting the season for them in 2024, but after an interception and a rushing touchdown against Minnesota, he was then carted off the field with a broken femur. This was absolutely horrible and gut-wrenching, as he'd be carted off the field, and it was one of those moments where nobody was saying anything. Unfortunately, he'd missed the entirety of the 2024 season, but going into 2025, he got a waiver. Honestly, I don't know if he's going to start, but Coach Belichick said he is coming back. He said, quote, "He's still limited, but he's definitely getting better. We'll take it day by day, but nobody puts in more work than he has. We'll see where it takes him, but he's definitely making progress." Honestly, if Max Johnson is truly going to be healthy by then, I would presume he will probably be the starter, just purely due to the amount of experience he has in college football. But honestly, his ceiling is no longer that high, both with the injury and with the 1 year of eligibility. I don't really see him taking North Carolina to the next level, and I mean, that's okay, but he's definitely going to get a fair shake at the starting job this fall, but that is entirely based upon if he can stay healthy and recover. Okay, so our last option, who's probably the most intriguing option, is true freshman quarterback Bryce Baker. Growing up in the state of North Carolina, Bryce said he already converted his father from a Duke to a UNC fan. Baker would eventually arrive at Walkertown High School and would start to blow up as a sophomore. He said he was no stranger to being kicked off the football field, as after every single practice, he rallied his receivers and he decided to throw to them until they were too tired. When they went home, he then dragged a net onto the field and threw passes into it until the coaches told him to go home. Or, sometimes, they just had to shut the lights off because he always wanted to be there practicing. This led him to becoming a big-time player. The recruiting spotlight fell on Baker in the spring of his sophomore season, as several Division I coaches, including North Carolina, NC State, Duke, Penn State, and Clemson, arrived at Walkertown High School to see him throw and see what his potential would be. But Walkertown would not allow Baker to use the actual football field since he was transferring to East Forsyth High School and jumping from 2A to 4A competition. Instead, Baker was told to cross the street and use the team's practice field where they had thick, uncut grass, and it seemed like more of a pasture than a gridiron. Baker said, quote, "We had no paint on the fields. It wasn't really good." Nevertheless, he sort of had a pro day-like showcase out on that field, and he wowed recruiters with his arm talent, ball placement, and his athletic ability. What's interesting is he did this without having yard lines to guide his throws. His mom said, quote, "I just remember all the coaches looking at me and looking at Bryce and just being so excited. My husband was also excited. That's where we felt that he's got it and he's onto something. He's got the it factor." This began Baker's quote-unquote roadshow, which was a series of college football visits during the summer to narrow down his choices to 3 different teams. He created a master spreadsheet ranking each visit based on certain criteria: how well the program developed quarterbacks, how many quarterbacks the program has put in the NFL, the vibe of the team, and the game day atmosphere. He then rated them on a 1 to 5 scale and created composite scores for each program. His mom said, quote, "The purpose was to really narrow down what Bryce likes about the schools and what his top 3 choices were, and Carolina just kind of rose to the top. North Carolina ended up tying with both powerhouses Clemson and Bama, and picking between the 3 was a decision that Baker would weigh until a dinner conversation at a camp in Louisiana. At the Manning Passing Academy quarterback camp, Baker sat down with former Tar Heel Drake May. He sought May's advice and authentic opinion about UNC. The conversation confirmed Baker's feelings, and he committed to North Carolina just 2 days after the academy concluded, and he also loved the new offensive coordinator, Chip Lindsey. His systematic approach to football led him to North Carolina, where development and success are his only focus. He also has standards. Baker's devotion to his development was not undermined by money, as apparently he turned down many fast food NIL deals because they don't fit his dietary goals, and he also doesn't want to give that garbage to other people or promote it. Many are saying that Bryce Baker was the next guy in line to come out of the state of North Carolina and ball out for the Heels, as Sam Howell was the first guy, as he became the all-time leading passer with 10,283 yards in 3 years. Another guy from North Carolina in Drake May then set the single-season record with 4,000 yards, and he became the ACC Player of the Year and a top 5 draft pick. Bryce Baker was seen as next up, but it almost didn't happen. With Mac Brown getting fired, some were wondering if Baker would end up sticking with them. When asked what other schools were being considered, Baker's dad said, quote, "Possibly Penn State and LSU." But Christmas then came early, as Baker decided to sign with Bill Belichick and the North Carolina Tar Heels. His dad said, quote, "He knows about Coach Belichick, and any kid would be excited to play for that coach who's won 6 Super Bowls over the course of his time in the NFL." In total, Baker was a star at East Forsyth High School, going 23-3, winning 2 conference championships, and throwing for 6,605 yards and 79 touchdowns. According to 24/7 Sports, Baker is a 4-star recruit, the number 8 quarterback, and the 86th best player in the class of 2025. Okay, so from here, who the heck is going to win this job? Even after researching and going through multiple articles, I don't really have a good take on this. I would say that Max Johnson is probably going to be the guy if he's healthy, but let's say he's not healthy. At that point, I think Belichick is probably down to Bryce Baker and Ryan Brown, as Brown would have the most experience at that point, but Baker has the highest ceiling. I guess it could sort of depend on what Belichick is wanting to do, because if he believes that Baker is the future of the program, you might as well trot him out and learn. But if he doesn't think the team will be very good this year, you might as well use Ryan Brown as the scapegoat, as you give him his opportunity and it may not work out. No matter what though, I think if North Carolina has a losing record by midway through the year and they're not getting good quarterback play, I bet one of the 2 true freshmen will be put on the field due to how the transfer portal works. If guys don't play, they transfer and leave. And honestly, it's going to be very interesting to watch these 2 blue chip freshmen, because I'm sure one of them will eventually probably leave. I'd say the least exciting option is probably Max Johnson, the most exciting option is Bryce Baker, and potentially the most logical option is Ryan Brown. But again, what the heck do I know? I couldn't find much information on the quarterback room, so if you're a North Carolina fan, be sure to let me know down below. Who do you think will win the job, and why do you want them to win the job? Also be sure to let me know what school I should cover next, and before you go, don't forget to also leave a like, subscribe if you're new, and check out all of the videos on the end screen. Hope to see you guys again soon, but until next time, peace.